I was saying that the Buddha had said in the Brahma Net Sutra and the Digha Nikaya that uh, a limited amount is understood to be an example of practice of patience, right? That the person, uh, they're perfecting patience by not by practicing, not acting on anger, but in that case, it's actually done out of it's meant to be an example in the bodhisattva path that it's possible to do very negative actions and what it would be normally negative actions, but have it actually have a positive result because the person is doing it out of compassion. Um, so does that make sense? Is that your question? Yeah. Um, but there's a lot of debate about that, right? It's sometimes said it was impossible that killing a person can be a positive action, but the motivation is positive, the great compassion. And so the ripened result of killing is very light compared to what it would be if the person did it out of anger. But there's quite some discussion about that. So anyway, the question was before was about birth in the higher realms, and also so we were saying you could not guard ethical discipline in this life, but then still have a very positive rebirth based on something you did in another past life. So the point is, somebody could see that through clairvoyance, or they could just see in this life the general statement: good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people, and come to the conclusion that there's no cause and effect. Right? So that's why the Buddha said there is, but it's inconceivable, and that it's so again, as I said, inconceivable. We have to be very clear. It does not mean the general points of karma are inconceivable. The way it ripens is inconceivable. It says that very clearly in the Abhidhamma Samachaya by Asanga. He says the general characteristics of karma are not inconceivable. The particular ripening of specific actions, that is inconceivable. So I often use the example of weather. Knowing how the weather works in a general sense is something you can learn in school, but then predicting the weather is quite a different story. You can make some general estimates, but often doesn't behave in the way we expect because we don't know all of the different factors that go into it. You'd have to know every single cause to be able to make an 100% accurate prediction, and that would essentially require knowing the entire universe, unless something is a completely closed system. All right, so I think even if it didn't require that, even just knowing all of the causes on planet Earth is pretty unusual. I don't know if any of the cable or the how do you say the people on television, right? The meteorologists, if they have that ability, but nevertheless, even just within lifetime to lifetime. But it said that we can still discern certain patterns. Karma. There's two ways. It said you have to put two things together to really have a conviction in karma. One is conviction in reincarnation, which is something that can be accessible both by reason and nowadays, I mean, even in the past, but even more so nowadays, by scientific investigation and evidence that there is something that happens. And also, of course, reason in terms of, is it possible? What is the mind? If the mind is a product of the brain, that doesn't work, right? So you have to think about those things. But then, so then once you have that idea, then also observing the way that cause and effect occurs even within one lifetime, that people who are angry, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, it seems to make their life difficult, seems to cause unhappiness for them and cause bad things to happen to them in this life, not just in a mystical way, but if they're very angry, then people don't like them and they don't get a job, or they get fired from the job, or they lose their spouse. As Shantideva said, what was it? What is it? Di zaje kyo gyur jimpe dukyang denmi che dona chorwa derne pa dinigaya yomayan, right? So this causes your the ones that are friendly to you, to be disappointed. And then even though you practice generosity to gather them together, right? You try to make friends by being very generous. It's not stable because you get angry and you lose your friends. And then says, in short, uh, a person who is angry abiding in happiness, such a thing is not possible. Right? So we observe things like that. We observe cause and effect within one lifetime, and then start to conjecture if there are multiple lifetimes, how that would just increase over time. Right? That people who practice particular habitual tendencies in one lifetime, that's going to carry over the effects of that. Um, it's still there's a lot more of thought that has to go into it, because there's still the question that can explain at least the results similar to the cause, that you're still habitually have the habit of doing something, or you're attracted to situations where where that kind of pattern occurs. But how it would actually affect the physical world outside of you, then again, I think it requires thinking about, in this life, is there any evidence that mind can affect the physical world? And again, that's something that can be investigated, and some people do investigate that. Um, it's not really a question. Like, some people ask, well, if it's all about karma, then how can my dedicating karma to you be of any benefit, because it's all individual? But then really, that's a question of how can mind affect the physical world. It's not a question of breaking the law of karma per se. Otherwise, you wouldn't be. You have to say that I can't give you medicine and benefit you. It's the same thing, right? I can't give you medicine to benefit you because it's your karma to be sick. Well, we agree. I can give you medicine, but then I say I can't dedicate my merits to you because it's your karma to have bad karma or whatever, to have bad experiences. Really, it's a question: can my intention affect you in a non-physical way? That's really what the issue is, and that is an issue. It's something that we have to investigate. But if that is possible in this life, then it's reasonable to think it would same thing would carry over into another life. There's things like maternal impressions. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that. This is something that's quite well documented in medical literature, but often ignored because it's not explicable by any modern normal means. Right, which is where a mother who is pregnant with a child has some very strong experience, like seeing somebody be shot while she's pregnant. And then when the baby is born, there is an impression on the child, like in the sense that there's a birthmark where the person that was shot that she saw. Right. So there seems to be some it seems to be some non-physical transfer of her mental state onto the body of the child. Um, this was something that was more well documented before it was discovered that there is no physical connection. It was originally assumed that the mother and the son, or the child, were one organism. When it was discovered in the mid 19th century that that's not the case, then they stopped documenting these things because they didn't make any sense anymore. So it's the case where something that doesn't fit into the paradigm is no longer paid attention to. But there are still documented cases of it happening. It's just much less attention is paid to these things. Anyway, so if that kind of thing can happen, then we wonder, well, if the mind can affect the body in that way, could that carry over into a future life? And maybe it would be stronger in that way, because the mental state at the time of death and time of birth is a very strong imprint. That's perhaps why the mother happens with the mother affecting the fetus in this way. I don't know of any cases that I can think of where a mother's impression after the child was born caused something to happen like that. Although there are certainly cases of, how do you say, telepathic communication between family members. That's a different thing. But also about affecting the physical body, there's a lot of evidence that's been collected about that, and so it's useful to look at, right? It's not. I think it's not something that sometimes people might think that this is getting away from the point of spiritual practice. It's just talking about mystical things, or that the Buddha said, "Don't worry too much about clairvoyance. You should worry about the path to enlightenment," which generally is true. You're not making the point of your practice as a practitioner to develop clairvoyance. But it's also important to think about things that we can investigate, because this is the Buddha's worldview, and the Buddha was very clear about his own experiences and that this is reality. So he certainly wouldn't have said, just take it on faith that I said it, don't worry about it. He said quite the opposite. So how do we get onto that point? Talking about nothing other than ethical discipline. She dune sungso. Tetar, sutrim nare la yang, domsem yang yang tene sungyume kyang. So this is an interesting point also. It's saying for each in the instance of practicing ethical discipline, you don't have to, it's saying you don't have to again and again rely upon the mind of restraint, right? Then he says, "Ko ni tek chempo ho shemena shindumete." Oh, I see. I missed it at first. This is what he's saying. He's saying, although you don't actually guard your ethical discipline, that's the point. You don't make a lot of effort again and again to generate the mind of restraint for each individual point of ethical discipline. But then you go and say, I'm a Mahayanist. Ko ni tek chempo ho. Right? Ko means nga, right? Me. So manani. So if you say that, shindu mede, that's a very base thing to do. That's not very incorrect, he's saying. So Saining Bodole, so this is in the Kshitigarbha Sutra, right? The Bodhisattva Dole. Gewelam Chupodidaki Sangi. So by those 10 virtuous actions, that's how you become a Buddha. Gang jisit soy bardu tana gewe legilam chik samyam mizungla. So if until you die, you do not even guard one path of virtuous action. One kyang sik dekedu mena dekedu ngani tek chempo what day, but then still in your words you say I'm a Mahayanist. Ngala nambe beyanda bazu bejandu solo shisen, and you say I'm aiming for perfect and complete enlightenment. Gangsak deni sindul sulchulpa. So that person is somebody with very faulty ethics. Zun chempo mawa. He's a liar, great liar. Sange chomdende tamchigi chengar jikten landur chipa mawa de. So he's somebody who's just speaking mawa. He's like speaking a nihilistic speech, essentially. He's speaking wrong things that is deceiving the entire world in the eyes of the Buddha. Right? The Buddha sees this. The Buddha knows that he's false, but he's just deceiving the entire world. So that person will die in a great state of confusion and will fall into wrong paths, essentially. Then Tsongkhapa says, so you should understand the word falling into incorrect or the wrong path is understanding to be falling into unfortunate migrations. They'll have a bad rebirth as a result of that. Namtrang, mingi namtrang, it's a synonym for that. Okay, so now the second part, right? The first part was so showing that those 10 paths of action are the main ones. Now actually ascertaining what are these paths of karma and result. So we have Napo Ledre, so the black karmas, being the negative karma and their results. Then Karpo Ledre, the white karma and their results. And Legi Nami Shendemboho. So then talking about the other divisions of karma, right? You could divide it many other ways. When you talk about Tendril, the 12 links of dependent ordination, you'll do this in the 7th year of the program here. You have this whole list of this karma divided this way and that way and this way and that way to try to have different ways of understanding what's going on. So Dambo Lasum. So the first, the paths of the black actions as Napole Lamngu, the actual paths of black actions, and then Chiangi Kepar, so the difference between heavy and light, and Deraki Drebu Damboho, and then teaching about the results of those. So Dambo ni Sokcha Bagangshena. So of course you might know the 10 non-virtues, right? Is killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, speaking trauma. So trauma, divisive speech, and then harsh speech, and then idle speech, covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong views. So those are the 10. So then we're going to just go through them one each individually, and what is it to mean to do that? What is the result of that? What are the actually I don't think it talks about the result. Yeah, the result is the third section, right? What is the result of doing that? Again, as I said, it's a general picture. It's certainly not always the result, but it's interesting to think about why would that impel such a result. So Sokchupa de Gangshena de la Duar. So it says in Duar. Duar is the compendium of ascertainments by a Sangha. In Sanskrit, it's Vinis something. I don't remember the name in Sanskrit, but I remember yeah, there you go. That sounds right. It's a commentary on the Bodhisattva Bhumi, which is also ascribed to a Sangha, although I've read that scholars think he didn't compose the Bodhisattva Bhumi, but this is his commentary on that other text. It's very long. So it's a big compendium of all the different kinds of practices that one would do. So it talks there about 5. It talks about the path of the action in terms of 5 categories. So the Ji, the basis, meaning the which you thing on which you act. So for killing, it's the person you are going to kill. And then Duje, which is the perception or the discrimination. So you ascertain correctly that this is the right person. You have to do that in order for it to be a full action. And then Sampa means the intention, right? And then Nyomong. So what is the affliction that's motivating you? So if Sampa is attention in the general sense, you wish to kill or something like that, and then the Nyomong is why. Are you angry? Are you greedy or whatever other impelling affliction there is? And then Ta is the end. So what completes the action? What is it? When does it become a complete path of action? So there's 5 there, but here, Barawasum Sampradude, we condense the middle 3 just into Sampa. So when you have discrimination, intention, and affliction, is all just condensed into intention here, into one. And then Jora Nene, and you add Jorwa, you add the application, meaning the action itself. What is the actual action you're doing? Ji tang sampatan joratan tarduk shir dude. So you talk about the 10 in terms of the 4 categories: the basis, the intention, the activity, the action, and the completion. So if we do it that way, it's easier to understand. Gompa Tamigelo. It's also not out of accordance with his intention of a Sangha, right? Saying it's categorizing it slightly differently, but it's the same point that a Sangha was making. It just makes it a little bit simpler. So de la Sokcha Gini, so the basis of killing. So Sokcha, right? Literally the word Sokcha means cutting life, right? You're cutting off the life force of somebody. So Sok Tang Dempe Semchen, it's a person who's alive. Or not a person, a Semchen, a sentient being, any sentient being who's alive. Diang Supapo Rangni Sona, so if the person kills himself, right? Joy Dikpa Yugi, so he has the negative action, the dikpa, really, I mean, sin, they sometimes translated it as, but sometimes people don't like that term. So he has the non-virtue, we could say, of the preparation of the action, or the action itself, right? But tarduk mela, so he doesn't have the completion. Because in the completion, you have to die before the person you're killing dies. The person you're killing has to die before you. If you'd suicide, you would die at the same time. So it's not a complete action. So it's like, for example, for a gelong, for a monk, if you commit suicide, it's a bompo. And a bompo means a near defeat, essentially. It's not a defeat because there's no monk when the person dies. So there's no monk to have a defeat, right? Now, if you attempt suicide, I think it would still be a bompo, actually, because it's at a bompo during the preparation, right? So it's a very heavy action, but it's not actually the complete action. Tarduk mepalakone, so thinking with having the intention that does not have a complete action, then the naljipe sale. So in Nadruchipesa, which is the yoga bhumi. Yeah. I think a yoga bhumi would be how you translate it, right? Yoga chara bhumi. Yoga chara. Nadruchipa. Right? It's actually the Jangsa, the Bodhisattva bhumi, is a section of the yoga chara bhumi, which includes the Sarvaka bhumi and the Bodhisattva bhumi. So in that text, it says Sokchak Paropo, the other person, as a plain meaning that the object has to be somebody else and not yourself. So it's not saying that it's not negative to kill yourself. It's saying that in order to have the complete action of killing, it has to be somebody else who's capable of dying before you. You might know, I don't know if anyone knows, the vow against killing for a gelong, it originated with suicide, right? There were some monks who misunderstood the Buddha's teachings on things being in the nature of suffering, and they thought we just don't want to live anymore. And then they actually asked the non-Buddhist ascetic to kill them, right? So then the Buddha then asked at the next Sojong, why are there so few monks today, Ananda? And he said, well, he checked. He said, well, they killed each other. And the Buddha said, that's really a big mistake. That was a misunderstanding of my teaching. So then he said, from now on, nobody is to kill anybody. But it wasn't, the story and originally was not somebody having the intention to kill someone else per se. The killer in that case actually was a non-Buddhist. He was not somebody the Buddha was disciplining. So Sampala Sumle, so the intention has three, right? So we condensed it, but then we break it down again. So the intention has the perception of the intention, the discrimination, the motivation, and the affliction, right? So it's like it was before, but then we have the second category, but with three subcategories. So you see here, the longest part is in the discrimination. It has 4 divisions, because that's very complex in terms of the action of killing. You have to have a very clear discrimination of what you're doing in order for it to be a complete action. It's still a negative action if you have a wrong discrimination. Like if, for example, if you see what you think is a rabbit that you're hunting and you shoot and it's actually a human, then it's not the full karma of killing a human, right? But it's still negative action. Now, in the commentary on Vinaya by Tsunawa, which is what we studied the last 3 years, he says that. But actually, in the commentary on Vinaya by Gyalwa Gendudrup, the first Dalai Lama, this is a very controversial point. He says that it's not the case. He's not talking about. I think he is. He is actually, even in this case. But the example he gives is if somebody emanates themselves as a tiger. But I think even if you just think it's a tiger because of you just don't, they're camouflaged or something. The point is, you think it's an animal, and you try to kill them, and it turns out to be a human. It is a defeat, he says. That's a big point of debate that we have here. In practice, I don't know how that would pan out. I've never heard of that happening. It's not. I've never actually heard of any monk committing a defeat by killing somebody, although I'm sure it does happen. I've heard of it happening in stories and history, but not anybody here that I'm aware of. But the point is, there's a big question of, do you have to ascertain correctly what you're doing or who you're acting on? It does say in the Vinaya, if you see somebody in the distance, you don't know who it is, but you think, I'm just going to kill that person, then it is a defeat. It's a matter of, you have to have it mistaken. You think it's somebody else, then it's a different story. But if you just think whoever's there, they say a general motivation, then it's still full action. So there's 4, it says, in this context, in terms of the perception, the discrimination. So there's 4 ways to understand, 4, not ways to understand it, but 4 aspects of understanding it here. So shi semchen tabula semchen du shepatang. So the basis is a sentient being, and you discriminate correctly that they are a sentient being. Or semchen mimpar du shepatang. Or that you discriminate that it's not a sentient being, right, incorrectly. Or semchen mimpala, semchen mimpar du shepa. Or it's not a sentient being, and you correctly ascertain that it's not. Or that it's not a sentient being, semchen du shepa. You discriminate that it is. So the example in the Vinaya is if it's a scarecrow, and you You think it's a human, and you go to kill them. What is the penalty for a monk? Right? That's a big question. What does it count as? There's no basis. There's no human being. There's also no completion. There's nobody dying. And the discrimination is incorrect. So a lot of the factors aren't complete. But I recall that it's still a bompo. So it says that's because the Buddha said that specifically. Even though it doesn't fulfill many of the factors, the Buddha said that's such a negative thing that it's still a bompo. Because there are cases where it lacks fulfillment of many factors, but it's still nearly a defeat because it's still very serious. The Buddha made it very specific about that point. Dushibashide. Now, I should also point out that I'm talking about the Vinaya here for you just because you're interested. I expect you're being monastics. But here we're not talking about the Vinaya, right? We're talking about the karma of killing. So that doesn't matter whether you have vows or not. And there is sometimes some not complete overlap. Like something can be a karma of killing, but not be a defeat for a monk. Or the other way around, I'm not sure. But for all of the actions, there's it's not exactly the same thing to get the karma of doing it versus the breaking of the vow for the monastic. So Dushe Dambo Tang Sumpani Matrua. So the first and the third are unmistaken, right? It's a sentient being, you know that it is, or it's not a sentient being, you know that it's not. And the second and the fourth, Nibbana Shipani Trua, they're mistaken. You think it's a sentient being, but it's not a sentient being. De la Kunlong Chedak Pena. So he's saying now we have specific intention, specific motivation. So I mentioned there's a general motivation, which is when they just say, I'll kill whoever's there. So that's another thing in the Vinaya. If you think there's a forest and you just think, I'm going to burn down this forest, I don't care who's in there. I'm just going to, if they die, fine. No problem for me. You don't even know there's a human in there and he dies. That is a defeat, right? But if you have the thought, I'm going to burn down this forest in order to kill this rabbit or whatever is out in there, and that's the only intention, then it's not actually a defeat, right? So a general intention is the same as having a specific intention for that person, but the intention of something else is different. But here he's talking about a specific intention. So you intend to kill a particular being that you know who it is. So he says, Legend kona senyamne. So you intend specifically you're going to kill Devadatta. Jorwat samne, and you do the action to do that. Chujudu norne sena, but then you mistake him, right? You mistake what is it? Yeah, I think it's Yajnadatta, right? Chujin is the name. So it's not actually Devadatta, it's Yajnadatta, but you think it's Devadatta, so you kill him. Ngoji Dibamepe, it's not the actual negative action. Now it is a negative action. The point is Nguji means it's not the complete negative action with all the factors complete because there was a wrong discrimination. So in order to have a complete negative action, you need to have a correct discrimination. Now, again, which is more negative, it's not saying it's not a negative action by any means. And it could actually, in certain cases, be heavier, depending on all kinds of other factors. But in terms of specifically understanding here, what does it mean to be a complete action? The point is that it has to have this, in general, in the discriminating factor is going to make it heavier. And for a monastic, it would not be a defeat, although I expect that person would still be expelled from the Sangha. I think nowadays they wouldn't tolerate somebody killing somebody and saying, well, I thought I was killing somebody else, right? But generally, technically speaking, they do not have to give up their monastic vows. It's not a defeat. So, Jorwe Tu Su Gang Jungyang. So at the time of the doing the action, if you just think, whatever happens, whoever it is, I'm going to kill them. So Nyampa, Kunan Chila Shupayon, if you have a general motivation, Dushe Matru Amigos, and then you don't need a non-mistaken discrimination, he's saying. In that context, it doesn't matter what you think. Because you think whoever it is, I'll just kill them. So it doesn't matter if you think it's one person or another. So Sultini Lamagulayang Chiripa Chiperchao. So you should know also that this is the same for the other 9. Now that's a point here. To be the complete negative action, yes, To be a defeat, no. So the reason I'm saying that is for sexual intercourse for a monk, you do not need correct discrimination, right? So you meet one woman on in the dark alley, you think it's somebody else, you have sexual intercourse, it does not matter. It's still a defeat, right? There's actually for that defeat, it's almost no toleration. Like you don't even know what you're doing, right? So, I mean, we don't have to talk about this in this discussion, but if you're making any kind of intention, right? So you're not intending to have sexual intercourse with somebody, you're just intending to have, to say fool around with them, but you end up having sexual intercourse accidentally, it is still a defeat, right? So in that case, because they say for monastics, they're very, very strict about that particular one because it's the hardest one to keep, essentially. But here, in terms of the 10 non-virtuous actions, is different. So in order to have the non-virtue of sexual misconduct, if you think it's your wife, but it's actually somebody else, it's not the non-virtue of adultery in that context, right? That's what he's saying. So it's the same for all 10, that you have to have the correct discriminating factor. And then Yomopani, so dusum gang rungo. So the affliction is any of the three poisons, right? So hatred, attachment, or ignorance. Doesn't matter. It's if whatever. So you could think, well, usually you'd kill somebody out of hatred, but greed is like you're just killing animals to eat them or whatever. Or ignorance. Usually the example of ignorance is that you slaughter a cow with the thought that this is virtuous. This is the how do you say, sacrifice. So you believe that this is actually a positive action. It's done out of ignorance. But nevertheless, it's still the full negative action of killing. So kunlao ni separatobo, then you wish to kill. That's the thought. So then joala joraponi. So then in terms of the action itself, then the jorapo, the person doing the action, says rangi chepaham. Shen chedu jupani gang che kyang drade. So either you do it yourself or you have someone else do it. It doesn't make any difference. It's the same. It's you order someone else to kill them. Joengoni sonam dukam rigaki gone joa chipala sokpagayang. So then the actual the nature of the action can be anything. He says it's weapon, poison, magic spells, or anything. Any way that you go around killing somebody. Right? So then Tardukni. So Joa de Kengi Paropo de Se Am Dukshengi Se Dushengi Shesi Woho. So he's saying by the conditions of what you did, then that person he dies then, or he dies at another time. That's a bit of a difficult question, right? So, like, you stab somebody today, then they're in the hospital for 3 months and they finally die, right? Now, there are complications that come in that. So I don't know if any of you know the story of the assassination of President Garfield in America. You know what happened? So in that context, somebody shot President Garfield, I think at a train station. He didn't die. It was not a fatal wound, actually. And he went to the hospital, and the doctor operated on him without gloves, without washing his hands. Right? It's 1881. I think in Europe they wouldn't have done that, but in America they still didn't believe in germ theory. So as a result of that, he developed sepsis, and he died after a month. So they caught the person who assassinated him, and the defendant, he said, I didn't kill him. It was the doctor's fault. Right? But they didn't take that as valid, and he was executed. But in this context, what would you do? What would you say? That's one of the major points of debate about when we talk about the action of killing. So it says like 2 monks conspire to kill somebody. One monk stabs him first, the other one stabs him second. and then he dies. Well, who gets the karma? Who gets the defeat of killing? Or do they both get it? Right? What if he wouldn't have died from just the first stabbing? Right? It's a bit, again, as I said, I think in the context of the monastery, they'd probably just expel both of them because it's inappropriate enough. But it's a point here when he says if they die later, how much later, and how many other factors then go into it, right? So then I think I don't even. I mean, we shouldn't even talk about these little things. But in the Vinaya and the debates, they have all these different permutations, right? So like, you do this and this and this, and although you're trying to kill him, it actually ends up extending his life for this or the other reason. I don't have to go into the details of that how it happens, but then what happens? You get a defeat, right? So I don't know. I don't know in practice. I think with the vow or the downfall for a gelong of sexual conduct, it is a much more relevant question. There are a lot of factors that can go in that can be relevant to actual things that happen. But I think with killing, that kind of thing is pretty unusual. Where somebody, it's not ascertainable. Was it were they really the cause of the death? I don't know. I mean, certainly people often do die later after being harmed some way. So then Deon Zule, so it says in the Abhidharmakosha, Ngata Nyamdu Shiwala, Ngome Lushin Kichuro, Shisubini Diriandraho. So he's saying the person has to die before you. That is the main thing. Right? So it's as with you or together with you. Now that's actually not what we usually accept. It says if they die at the same time as you, or I think it's saying this is the opposite. If you die before them or you die together with them, then it's not a full action, because you've already taken on another birth. And so you're no longer the same person. So if a monk stabs somebody and then that monk dies, if the other person stabs him too, and then the monk dies first, there's no defeat. It's still not a good way to die. It's a very heavy karma, but technically there's no defeat because there's no more monastic vow at the time after the person has died. And likewise, there's no complete action of killing in that context. Okay, so now, Majimba Lembergini. So now the object of theft, right? Majimba Lempa means taking what is not given. So Shengi Yongsu Sunwei Ze Ganga Runwo Ho. So something that belongs to somebody else that they consider theirs. Shengi Yongsu Sunwei Ze. Right, there are more factors that go into that. But we don't have to get that here in the Vinaya. But the main point here is just something that somebody else considers their own. And ze, so it's a thing. It's a substance of some kind. Now nowadays we could argue, well, you could take somebody's credit or something, right? I think that still would count. But what's the substance there? It's maybe a little bit more questionable. And that's among the 4 downfalls of a monk. The one on stealing is the most debated. There's so many questions about what is it and nowadays it's still the same, right? Things like software piracy or all kinds of ways that you can. It's questionable. Does that count as stealing? And it actually becomes very relevant sometimes. Some people argue if what if you're in one country and you commit fraud on somebody in another country, and it's not illegal in your country what you're doing, but it is illegal in their country. That actually is in the Vinaya. There are things about, they don't talk about fraud on the internet, but they talk about if you steal from somebody in your country and they're from another country, and what you're stealing from them is valuable in their country but not in your country, or if you steal from them in the borderland, right? Then it says whoever's country is closer, you based on the law of that country. And so that these things come up. Or there's in the Vinaya, they also talk about customs tax. So you pass through a gate and you're supposed to pay the customs, and you don't, with the intention to not have to pay. It says that's a defeat. But then there's also a question, well, what did you take? Right? What did you take that belongs to somebody else? Right? You have the money in the first place. You owe them the money. You didn't pay it. So there's a lot of points that we debate there. And again, that's very relevant. That thing definitely could happen. Or you get on a bus and don't buy a ticket intentionally. That also is a defeat, right? So yeah, what does it mean? What it says here is something that somebody else holds as their own. In that case, what if they don't even know that you didn't buy a ticket, right? Nobody's thinking your money is mine. Right? But it said, well, generally speaking, in that country, the law is that that money belongs to the government. Now you have to pay. So in that sense, it's a general thing that they. But then it's sort of piracy, right? So you just copy something that belongs to. Then you didn't take anything from them, right? I don't think that's a defeat. Actually, we debated that. I think it's still quite serious and not good for a monk to do something if it's against the law and the person. The main thing is that the person wouldn't want you to do that, right? That they would, if you asked, "Can I do this?" They would probably say no. If they could, if they would say, "You better," you ask them. But if you knew they would say no, then it's probably not a good thing to do. And it could be a bompo. We talked about that in debate. Like, what is it? Near defeat. That one factor is missing. That there's no value to what you're taking. Essentially, you're just copying. The copy is now. It's not the same thing as what was taken. But these are all very relevant questions. I think more relevant than the ones about the killing, right? Those are more just make for good debate, essentially. So sambala sumle. So then the intention there's threefold. So dushe is the dushetan nyomoni. So the intention and so the discrimination and the affliction are the same as before. So the discrimination is you correctly discriminate, it belongs to somebody, right? And then you correctly have the affliction, any of the three afflictions. So anger, attachment, or ignorance. So what would be anger? You steal from somebody because you don't like them, you want to harm them. And attachment is more likely, you're just greedy. And then ignorance, I suppose, yeah, you think that it's the right thing to do. You think that this is a virtuous action or whatever kind of thing. So I don't remember if there's a specific example that's given about what you would do, stealing out of ignorance. If you steal out of ignorance literally, that you don't know you're stealing, that's very different, right? It's more that you think that this action is correct, is the right thing to do, but you know you're stealing. So kunlongni means the intention, the motivation. So mana yang parole droa do boho. So although the person did not give it to you, you wish to separate him from it. That's how the defeat of stealing. That's the origin story. There was a monk named Norjin. I don't know how you say that in Sanskrit, and he wanted to cut down a tree, and the king didn't give him permission, but he did it anyway. It belonged to the king. So the person said, no, don't take that, but nevertheless, he went and took it. So Jorola Joapuni Ngaradhandrala. So the person who's doing it's the same as before, meaning that either you could do it yourself or you ask somebody else to do it. That's also one of the hardest debates there is how, if you ask somebody else to steal for you, when does it become the full action of stealing? Because usually you have to know that you get the object and you think it's mine. But if they do it, when does it become yours? So, for example, if you're sleeping when they steal it, then there's certainly no thought in your mind, I got the object. You don't have any conscious thoughts. Is it a defeat then? Is it a defeat later when they give it to you? So joy ngoni, the actual action is tu tropatang javne kua gang che kyang drauho. So is it whatever you do it, you forcefully take it from them, or you wait in hiding and you steal it. So basically it says you rob them or you pickpocket them here. But yeah, and he's giving more examples here. In the Vinaya, there's a lot of examples of how you could steal. Because it's the same thing now. There's all ways you can deceive somebody out of their property. So it says bulong ton chiwetang. So debts and what's entrusted. So like if somebody gives you a loan and you have to pay it back, but then you decide I'm not going to pay it back, it's a defeat right there. So it's also that you didn't even do anything. It said that's actually there's no physical action there. It's just a mental decision, right? Or chua. So they entrust you to do something. The Manawi here saying that you do it for them. So I think the point is you give somebody a loan and then overcharge them, right? So that happens all the time, right? Sometimes the local people here, they go in the rickshaw and they intentionally overcharge you. I've certainly seems to happen sometimes. I don't know, maybe they don't know, maybe they have a different idea of the price, but it seems to happen, right? Is that considered stealing? I think in many countries it would be, right? If there's a fixed price and then they lie about it. So for a monastic, yes, it is. If you intentionally overcharge someone when you know it's not the right price. So then yuchepa means deceit, right? So you tap shengi, so that you deceive them in some other way. Shengi kyang majimbalam. Somehow you get something from them that they didn't give you. Rangham shengi donam, so for yourself or for somebody else. Or even if you're doing it in the intention to harm them, right? You're not getting it because you want it. You just want to harm them. Drade, whatever it is, it's stealing. It's majin leno. It's taking what is not given. Tartupni is the completion of the action, duale, in the same text, the compendium of ascertainments. Ne shendu poboho. Yeah, this also in Vinaya we had a lot of debate about this, right? So it moves from one place to another, right? So there's all kinds of problems there. Like, what if you steal property? It didn't move anywhere, right? So, but then he says it right here. She sung su de don la mitumba manga. So he says many ways that wouldn't work, basically. But they ne shendu puba sumba sunchet something. It's merely an illustration that something moves from another place, because he says shingla sopa nene poor mekyang, right? A field doesn't move from one place to another. But tartuk shak gupa jino. But it's the same for the completion. But then the question is what? It says it's the same. Well, when is it the completion? So what some people say in Vinaya is it moves from being the property of somebody else to being yours, right? So you sign an illegal deed. Like I said, that's actually also in the Vinaya. You file a court case unlawfully, and then you win their property from them in a way that's deceitful. Once I guess the contract is signed, that's when you get the stealing. So dena toplo kepo ho. So but he says from that you get the thought, I stole it. Toplo, I got it. That's the actual completion. But as I said, that's very problematic in terms of like if you ask someone else to do it. But then here anyway, he does say, dehang tok to jupa ham korajupna. But if you ask somebody else to steal it for you, it's sufficient just for them to get that mind. So they steal it and they think I got it. You don't even have to know about it. Perna, so for example, rangi meje kyang ngakbe poroposena. So although like you don't even know it, but you order someone else to kill him, sena de nam shiwatang surujukem muji dikbajungwashino. So when that person dies, you get the karma of killing, whether or not you know it. So he says it's the same thing. You order somebody else to steal. When they steal it and they know that they have it, you get the karma of stealing, even if you don't even know that the action is complete. So again, in Vinaya, we examine every single possibility. There's a whole section on this. Like, what if you order them to kill before you took monastic ordination, and then you become a monk, and then they die? Well, it's not a defeat, clearly it says, because all of the steps of the action have to be done as a gilong. But then some people argue you're not a gilong, because when you take your monastic vows, you have to have the intention to keep all of your vows. So if you're still thinking, "Oh, I ordered him to kill," and I'm in some part of your mind, I'm waiting for him to get killed, you wouldn't get your monastic vows. If you decide, "Oh, I made a mistake. I wish hadn't said that. It's too late to take it back because this person is after him and I can't call him back," then actually there's no karma of killing anyway, complete karma, because you no longer have the intention all the way through. But then what if you do that then you, after you become a monk, you get your monastic vows. Then you decide again. Actually, I do agree. I think I should. It was a good idea to do that. Right? All kinds of little things. That again, I don't know in practice how much these things actually happen, but they're very precise about that. That's what will happen if somebody breaks a vow and they go to the gecko here. He will ask them very precise questions to ascertain absolutely for sure that all the factors are complete. So I think we'll stop there because next is sexual misconduct, which is also quite complicated. It's actually a lot more in here, so we'll talk about that next week. But we can have questions now, either from you and can you see on the online who if there's any questions? Are you able to access that? Okay, so actually, are there of you on the chat list for the Lumrim? That's how we were doing it before.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I'm just on the group chat for called
Lumrim Live. Yeah, in there. So they'll post the questions in there. So if anyone, but if you have questions, first of all, the two of you.
I guess
Yeah.
I'm a little confused about so the like you ask, let's say you ask someone else to go steal something,
Yeah.
and then the moment they steal it, then a karmic seed is planted on your mind stream. How does
Yeah.
that work exactly?
Yeah, that's a big point of debate, right? Where is the because a karmic seed, how does it get planted, and how does it get planted if you don't even know what happened, right?
Yeah.
Where is the intention that leads to it? So some people say, well, you did the action of saying, do this, go steal that, right? That makes the seed. That seed then becomes the impelling karma at that time. That's one way people express it. But there's problems with that, right? That's a major point of debate, both in Vinaya and also when you debate about Alaya Vijnana, the all ground consciousness. It's because there's a lot to talk about in there about planting seeds in the mind and so forth. So generally, yeah, it seems to be understood that it's the intention to steal or to kill that's in your mind stream, and then that just gains that power at that time. It becomes the impelling karma. Well, even if it was there, right? So if you kill somebody, their dying is not your karma, right? So where is the karma of killing? Did it happen when you first physically assaulted them, but then they died 20 minutes later? Right? When they're dying, you're not doing anything. You're just watching. And it's not decision, oh, I did a good deed by killing them, because that's actually later than they're dying, right? It says you get the karma when they die. So where is what is it that's actually the karma? It's like when they die, suddenly the new thing just appears in your mind. It actually, it kind of seems that way, right? In terms of we talk about connection between sentient beings, then you could talk about it somehow, that there's some kind of subtler connection. But at least other than in tantric theory, in the sutra system, that there's not so much talk about that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the group chat I'm in might not be the same one because it's just the people that usually are here. So
Oh yeah, there's two different chats. There's the one for preparing the teachings, and then okay, so
I can check on this phone.
is it see if it's in here? Yeah,
it's possible.
might be on the phone. Otherwise, we can get Alexia to get it. I could get my phone from my room, but that would just take some time.
Those are Cathex's notifications. Actually, I think that might be it.
That's the settings.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So we apologize for the technical difficulties here on our side.
We're trying.
If it's an issue, I'll just run to my room quickly. That's probably the simplest thing.
Yeah, is the setting.
Yeah. Okay, why don't I go quickly and get my phone?
If this is on YouTube, I could probably just pull it up on my phone, I guess. If,
Well, on YouTube, there's not gonna be the question posted, right? It's on the, it's usually on the chat. I don't think there's a way for them to post
oh,
the
okay,
questions on YouTube.
I see.
So
Yeah.
just 1 minute,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
very quickly. Okay, sorry for the interruption. So there is one question. It's a very relevant question. So it says, how much responsibility do we have in relation to the actions of other people in terms of them killing, e.g., eating meat or killing mosquitoes? Yeah, that's a question that there's the traditional answer, and there's also, I can talk a little bit about my own feelings on that. Generally speaking, it's said that it's indirect. It's much lighter because there's no action or really necessarily even an intention. And I generally think that makes sense, but I think it's also certainly not something to dismiss. That I take it very seriously that as monastic practitioners or Buddhist practitioners in general, that we have to be very mindful of the effects that our actions are having, both on the ones that are harmed and the ones that we're inciting to harm. It's like saying, well, it's no problem, they killed the animal for me, so it's okay. But if we have compassion, we don't want them to have to experience the result of their karma. So, and it also depends on, to some degree, on our awareness of it. Now, this might again be a question, we talk about ignorance, right? So although we don't know that what we're doing is so harmful, there's still negative karma created. But it might be compounded if we know, right? If we're very aware of the factors and we just don't care and we think it doesn't matter or it's more important that I get what I want. But there are, in terms of the Vinaya, it's important to recognize that it's not a downfall per se, and that's important because we can't do everything, right? We try our best as practitioners not to harm, but it's impossible to survive in this world without being involved in harm in some way. Even if we're purely vegan, there's still harm to the earth by plowing the earth or whatever else, and all the other beings that live there. And if we never go in a motor vehicle, it's better that we have less contribution to pollution and to harm to beings, but it's unlikely we can manage that to live a normal life. And even if we can most of the time, everything we do is going to harm them somehow. And so it's a question of degree and trying to limit it as much as we can. So yeah, personally, as I said, my own personal opinion, I feel very strongly about abstaining from eating meat or really even taking animal products at this point. But it's certainly not, in some sense, it's actually less in accord with the Vinaya to live that way if we look literally at the words of it. Right? We look at Devadatta, who split the Sangha. Two of his 8 things or 6 points that he leveled against the Buddha was that the monks should not eat meat and they should not drink milk. So Is actually a bit of a thing today. Now, when I tell my classmates I don't drink milk, they say, "What are you, Devadatta?" But that's, I think, just a historical bias in some sense. But I think we have to look at the different context. In the context of the time of the Buddha, this is my personal feeling, that it was very different. The Buddha, they were beggars. We are not beggars today for the most part. We're asking, we get sponsorship, but we can choose what food we buy. In some countries, it's not the case. Some Buddhist practitioners, they don't, they're still beggars. Um, and a lot of it at that time had to do with caste divisions. We look at the stories of the history of the Buddha, and that not eating meat would be to proclaim we're pure Brahmins, and we only take, basically it would only mean not begging from non-Brahmins. So the Buddha wanted to connect with all society, and the people of lower castes were the ones often eating meat. Um, so to say that it would kind of be a way of separating ourselves from them. And so the Buddha wanted to say, we will accept food from anybody. We'll beg from any sponsor that we want to give them the merit of giving us this food. So personally, I've actually never really made a clear decision. I can't imagine eating meat. I'm just very strict about that. But what would I do if I actually was out begging, which we don't do here, and somebody gave me meat? Would I just say, no, it's not very nice, is it? So yeah, I think we have to judge the situations, but I feel in my current situation, I feel very strongly that this is important for a number of reasons. And one is that in this context, I think living in India as monastics, eating meat is something that really offends the local people. The local Indians do not like it when monks eat meat. Some of them lose faith, or don't even have faith in the first place, but they just don't get interested in Tibetan Buddhism because they find that when the monks eat meat, it's very surprising to them. Indian monks, I don't believe, eat meat in most contexts. It's just assumed. Like I just booked a place to stay in Bangalore in a few weeks, next month when I go there next time to teach, and so the person who is renting this room, he asks that you explain who you are in a brief message before he confirms your stay. So I said, I'm a Buddhist monk who's going to be teaching at the local center. He sent back a message. Oh, is it okay with you if one of the other residents eats meat? But he just assumed that, of course, he's a monk. He might be offended by that. So we have to take into account the situation we're in, the times that we're in. That's one thing. And also, I think that with today, the issues with the environment, to me, that's like even a bigger issue. That the harm to the animals is still a very big thing. That's why I became vegetarian originally. But nowadays, that's even a more of an important thing to me, that knowing how harmful it is to the environment, that wanting to be part of a movement that is working for that. And I think there's actually a lot of things in the Vinaya about the Buddha saying how important it is to protect the environment, and asking the monks to go against previous injunctions. Like it was very interesting. A couple years ago, the head of the science center asked me to translate a sutra that I had never seen before. But the sutra was basically a story. It was in the Vinaya, it was one of the Vinaya sutras, that the monks were in a place where there were no trees, and it was just an uncomfortable place to live. And the lay people asked the monks, "Can you please plant trees?" And said the Buddha told us not to. So the lay people went and asked the Buddha, and they said, no, they should plant trees. And he gave instructions on how to do it. He said, in this context, it's important that you make a better environment. And there's all these details about how to take care of the trees. So I think in a context where there's a world crisis like this, I think the Buddha would not say, oh, we should just not be involved. It's not our problem. Right? So that's my personal thing. But again, it's like everything. These are debatable points, and it's something that intelligent monks should and can debate. It's not clear, and there's all reasons to think one way or the other. And as I said, there might be other situations I could be in where I might think it's better to act this way or the other. The same thing with the mosquitoes, right? So you asked to put mosquitoes, and we have dengue fever here at Serra, and they have sprayed for mosquitoes before. I think they have to. I think it might be an injunction of the local government that they have to do that. But I kind of wish they didn't, for a number of reasons. One is that I don't like the killing of mosquitoes. Also, it's bad for everybody. They spraying this probably DDT around the monastery. And I don't think it's necessary. I think there'd be other ways we could do it without doing that. But it was effective, at least last year. I think there were a lot less mosquitoes and less dengue than there had been the previous year. And if there was more dengue here, which there was a lot of dengue a few years ago, then it's going to spread to the local people and it's harmful to everybody. So there are ethical questions. What do we do? What is really the best thing to do? It's not clear. We have to think. I think Lama Yeshe once, somebody asked him, I thought it was a very nice answer about these kind of things. What do you do when you do this or that? Both actions are negative. He said, then you should think about what creates the least negative karma and do that action. Right? It's a similar principle in the Vinaya, that if you have no choice, but there's two negative actions, you're actually allowed to do the less negative one. Now, if it's less negative in the sense of it breaks the rules of the Vinaya, it's a prescribed negative action. In the Vinaya, there's no toleration or no allowance, really. Toleration isn't the right word, but no allowance for natural negative actions. But in terms of the Bodhisattva vow, again, things get more complicated. You have to look at what is most beneficial. So in the Vinaya, if they say, I'm going to kill you or kill this goat, you say, kill me. It's in the Vinaya, if you say, kill the goat, not me, then it's not a defeat, it's just a goat, but still, you're breaking your vow. But in the Bodhisattva vow, it might be different. If you are a Bodhisattva who is every day being of great benefit to beings, and you know that if you live more longer, it's going to be of great benefit, not just purely out of selfishness and wanting them to kill somebody, not me. It's questionable whether that would be the right decision, because you can be of so much benefit with your time. So there's more room, a lot more room really in the Bodhisattva vows for interpretation according to situations and making considerations about these things. And that's actually why, as far as I understand it, in most East Asian countries, monks are vegetarian. It's not based on the Vinaya, it's based on the Bodhisattva vow. And there are Bodhisattva vow sutras that talk about that. They're very strict that the Bodhisattva practitioners should not be eating meat. And there are many Bodhisattva sutras, so some say different things, but those are the ones that they take as very authoritative in East Asia. So, yeah, that's a very good question, as I said, and I hope that was helpful. So I think we should stop there. It's already about 5 o'clock. So maybe we can do just a closing prayers. So, yeah, we just do the final Lamrim dedication. Elections vast as space, massed and working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I not reach this state, may I be held in your love and compassion for all my lives Manjushri. May I find the best and complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings to the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I feel this treasure of happiness and aid. Minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace. And the Buddha's needs to be theirs for a very long time by this graded path to enlightenment completed to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who would meet limited adversity, conditions for practicing the excellent paths, never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of our prosperity spread everywhere. Okay. Thank you.